So in the next video, we're actually going to go ahead and start kind of working through some of the data management tools, and then I'm also going to go ahead and introduce you to what the primary analysis tools in GIS. And again, we're not going to do anything overly complex to here today, but these are the tools, things like creating a buffer, summarizing the data with inside of a polygon that you're going to use over and over and over again in ArcGIS. And so one of the reasons that you need to learn some of these tools is relatively simple, is that ArcGIS Pro, much like its predecessor, crashes fairly frequently. It's one of the reasons that we should probably always be doing this, is going ahead and saving our project just to make sure we're not losing work that we've done. Now, fortunately, most of the time the work we do is in creating layers, and that work ends up being, the layers don't disappear when the mapping project shuts down on us. But one thing that we can definitely do to make sure that we speed up the processing times, we reduce the likelihood of crashing, is that we can actually start to manage our data. So once we've kind of figured out the area that we want to work on, a study area boundary. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and keep with Manhattan. One of the things that I want to go ahead and pull in is I was able to locate a very complete digital base map of New York City. And you'll actually see that this is going to take a second to populate, and it just kind of comes up, and it's the street grid, and lots of other information kind of embedded within it. But this is a very large file with lots and lots of lines. If I go ahead and open the attribute table, and my attribute table is set to pop out, it'll tell you that it has 67,000 polylines, right? That's what is causing the software to crash more than likely. So what I'm going to do is just show you real quick how to cut down this larger data set just to Manhattan. And it's really very simple. We go to analysis, and one of the tools that's right here, this is kind of the frequently used tools are always available here. There are hundreds more if you click on the toolbox next to it. But one of the ones we're going to use is Clip. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually insert here, and it's the digital city map that we want to go ahead and cut out, and the clip feature is actually the boundary that we're going to cut it to. And remember, a minute ago we created this selection, this Manhattan boundary. And so now what's going to go ahead and happen is that it's going to go ahead and save, and it's set up to save to my geo database, which is exactly what I want. And realistically, that's a long name for what I want, and I'm just going to go ahead and put NYC base as my, and then I'm going to say, I'm just going to put the name of the tool that I'm using with it, which is called Clip. And that's what it's going to name it. I'm going to go ahead and hit run. It's going to take a minute to go through and cut out these 67,000 polylines. So I'm going to pause the video while it does that. After that, it goes ahead and completes. It'll actually go ahead and say that it's completed successfully by having a little green pop up. If you get a red, that means you've got an error, and there's definitely some work that we can do. It shouldn't happen in this particular application. But now I can go ahead and turn off the rest of that data, and right for the moment, I actually don't need my boundary layer on anymore. And so what I can do at this point is I can actually go ahead and turn off the streaming world topo map and the world hillshade behind things, because I've got the street grid for Manhattan, and we can come in and kind of take a look at kind of the digital base map that's been created here behind it. Certainly at any time if we need it, we can go ahead and turn it back on and take a look at things. But between that and, let me go ahead and change the symbology around here a little bit. So let's go ahead and change this up so that there is a dark gray applied to that layer, and that my New York City parks and open space selection that I created here, that I put in purple, I'm going to go ahead and actually just use the gallery to restore that to park, right? And so now you can see those are the two layers that I'm working with, right? Everything kind of pops up here. Well, what I want to do next is I actually want to go ahead and continue to show you how to use this data. One of the things that we're going to take a look at here in just a minute is actually this tree project layer. And I'm going to go ahead and just have you drag that in with me. And so what this is that this tree project layer has gone and taken a look at all of New York City's public street trees. And so I'm just curious that around Central Park, if we went one block out from Central Park, and so real quick while I'm sitting here, let's grab our measuring tool, come from, roughly the boundary right here around Central Park. If I go out a block, it's about, what's 1,100 feet, somewhere in that range, right? So if I wanted to know within a one block, buffer surrounding Central Park, one way I could do it is I could go in and actually draw that, right? I showed you in the last set of videos how we could go draw our own polygon. But a different way to do it is just to go ahead and actually set up an option here. And I'm going to turn the tree layer off for a minute, because what we need to do is that within our selection, we're actually going to go in here and we're going to, actually I'm going to use Explore real quick. I want the FID number. It's 5905 for Central Park, or Central Park is the name, right? So I double check that. I'm going to go to Select Attributes. Within my selection, what I am after is a new selection. And again, I can just go ahead and type in my FID, which is called a field identification number, and hit OK, and you'll see that all of Central Park has now been selected. I'm going to right click on that, come down to selection, and I'm going to go ahead and create a layer from selected features. I'm going to go ahead and turn off all the others right now. We just have Central Park, and so I mean, if I want, just for my own clarity here, I can just come in and change the name on this, and all I did was double click on the name itself and just call this out as Central Park. I don't need to necessarily save that for anything else down the road, right? We're just going to look at this. Well, now that I've got Central Park, I'm going to go back into my analysis tools, and I'm going to use something called Buffer. And Buffer does exactly what it says, is that if I take Central Park, so my New York City Central Park, and I'm going to create New York Central Park buffer. What I tend to do here when I create a buffer layer is that I will go ahead and put 1,100 feet, just so that I know that distance that I was, that I'm setting out, because right here, linear unit, we're actually going to do this in feet. And the upside of it is that every object in a GIS environment is scaled accurately already, right? That's why the measuring tool works wherever it goes. If it's not scaled accurately, then it doesn't actually fit and project into a GIS. And so in terms of units, we can always go in and change the units to whatever we want. But in this case, we want 1,100 feet. And the only other thing I'm going to do here, and I can explain this but to get a clean buffer, just a single polygon, what you're going to want to do instead of clicking on no dissolve is you want to click on dissolve all features. And the reason for that is that I think there's a little circle, the component down here that's part of Central Park. And what it will actually do is it's going to buffer all of the features. And so anything that's in that original shapefile is actually going to be included, whether it's part of what we see as the rectangle or not. And so in this case, I just want it to kick out one polygon. I'm going to go ahead and click run on that. It shouldn't take very long, but I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while it does that. All right, and you're going to see, jump back in. There's a perfect 1,100 feet all the way around the edge here, and that works. One of the challenges that does pop into this is that I'm actually not interested. You can actually see that it created, within the buffer, it actually created a polygon that includes the interior there. I'm going to show you a different tool real quick, because really what I want is I just want the buffer area. I don't want the area inside of Central Park to be included within that. And so we're going to use a different tool, and that tool is called Erase. And when you click into here, I actually don't think Erase is actually on this list. And so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go ahead and click on this toolbox next to it, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to just search for a tool called Erase. Right, Erase jumps up as the first tool here. What I'm going to do for my input features is that this new buffer I just created, 1,100 foot buffer, is my input. My erase feature is going to be that original New York City Central Park layer I created. And now this is going to be my New York Central Park buffer only, is what I'm going to name it. And I'm going to click run on that. And again, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while that runs. And at the end of all of that, if I go ahead and just kind of turn off the other layers, what you're going to see is that I get that perfect donut that I was looking for in the first place. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is turn back on that tree layer. So now we've got a situation where we have all of these trees, and if I zoom in on them and click on what you're actually going to see, whoops, click on the tree itself. You're actually going to see that they actually have the species and a bunch of other information recorded on every one of these trees in New York City. Um, but again, I'm only interested in kind of how many trees are within that buffer area. There's two different ways to do this, and I want to show you both. One of those is a tool called Summarize Within, and Summarize Within's right here. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead and put my input polygon as my buffer only, and my input features as my trees project layer. Within this, I would like to summarize. I think I just want to do summarize. Yeah, the tree ID. I think tree ID should be. Let me double check one thing while we're looking at this real quick. Again, you can always go back to your attribute table. I want to make sure that it just summarizes out the information. Oh, okay, this will be fine. It's actually going to force me to look at it. There's better information in here than what I was saying before. One of the things we can do is we can actually look at how big all of those trees are. So we're just going to do tree, the diameter, breast height, and we're going to do a mean statistic for that within this. Again, just to keep this relatively simple, I'm going to go ahead and hit run on this. What this will produce is a count of how many trees are within the buffer, and then it will produce a mean score of what size those trees are at dBH. All right, that went ahead and ran successfully for me. And now when I open up the attribute table, it's actually going to only have one entry, and that entry is the summary information that I requested. So it's the mean or average dBH of all of the trees located within an 1,100-foot buffer of Central Park. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and show you that because I actually want you to go ahead and report that out in your assignment. And so I want to show you the alternative way of doing this. Again, we've been using selection tools before. One thing just to point out, whenever you're doing selections, sometimes you'll end up with, a blue selected feature somewhere over here and you can't figure out what to do with it. The clear buttons always hangs out right here, and so you can clear any selected features at any time by clicking on that. But the other type of selection I want to show you here is one called select by location. And what select by location does is that in this case, what I want to go ahead and do is that I'm going to go ahead and summarize the trees, or just select the New York City trees project. So all of the trees that are located with, that intersect with, so that are located within, and so this intersection, so if you were to lay them on top of one another, it's basically everything inside of that, within our buffer only, right? And so this is a new selection. It should be all set up, and when I hit OK, what I hope will happen is that we're going to get an answer. All right, we'll get a selection feature, and if I go ahead and go up to my trees and I go to selection and I tell it to make a new layer from selected features, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the other layer off, what you're going to see now is that I only have the trees inside of that buffer remaining. Now, I'm trying to think if I have a good layer on this. Well, I'll go ahead and just open this up real quick. So the last thing to do if I wanted to get that mean going through it this direction is that I can go ahead now and just open up my attribute table on this selection. What it's going to do is it's going to tell me how many trees are in here if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, right? And so you have to click on load all to get that. So I think I just gave you one of the answers. The other thing that you can do here is that you can actually go ahead and search through this and look for that dBH, so tree dBH. Now, if you right click on that, what you should be able to do is come down here to statistics, and underneath that statistics, you should be able to find the mean dBH. I'll be curious to see if they actually match, because they should, in theory, match between the two different techniques for calculating that. And that's really it. We've covered clip, we've covered buffer, we've covered erase, we've covered summarize within, and we've covered two different types of selections in this video. These are the basic analysis tools. There are many, many more within GIS, but these are the ones that you're going to use constantly when you're working with vector-based, which is the type of data, point, line, and polygon data that we're working with here.